Good evening, everyone. We truly apologize about the delayed start today. We had a few minute technical difficulty here, but now we are on live. And as you know, we're going to be talking today about, or Dr. Cohen actually is going to be talking today about stress and how does that impact our immune system. And actually, he's going to be touching the points on why do we need stress and how does it help for us to survive in the today's environment. So as usual, you guys type your questions underneath and ask any questions you want Dr. Cohen. I relay them to him during his talk. And as you know, we are open for business. We're open for your support and your generous feedback and very positive feedback about the lectures and Dr. Cohen's work keeps us going, keeps us motivating to go through the crisis. We are here for you. You can reach us at any time at our email or phone. And as usual, we're going to continue our meditation tradition at the end of the talk. So stay tuned and stay for the meditation and be proactive in this talk. All right? Enjoy your evening.
Thanks. Sorry for the delay. As you probably, those that know me, I'm useless technologically, so I had nothing to offer to fix it. So tonight's talk is supposed to be on stress, and I'm trying to figure out how the best way for us to approach stress. Without stress, we don't exist. Life is dependent on stress. There's even a patient I had many years ago whose job was to come into Silicon Valley corporations and turn them around. And he was the most relaxed person in the world that I ever met. He said the worse the stress is, the better he feels. He experienced stress as a challenge, as a way to grow, a way to learn, and a way to project himself. So there's what's called eustress, EU stress, which is good stress, and certain people thrive on the stress. And other people, when confronted with stress, fall apart. Now, we're a particular difficult time in history, and I wanted to go back on things that we've already learned so we can build on that, because the key is survival and how we're going to not only survive, but how we're going to live with each other, and how we're going to be productive, and how we're going to reach our destiny. As you know already, I've said over and over again that each one of us that's listening tonight has a unique destiny. Each one of us has overcome impossible odds to get to this point. There's life everywhere. There's the universe, there's the earth, there's the solar system, and there's multiverse. And very, very few actually make it to when they can manifest themselves in a lifetime where they can learn, grow, and be productive and contribute. And to make it to this point, you have to show unusual abilities of fortitude and determination, and also having purpose and meaning in your life. So let's go on a little bit about stress. The history of stress started in the 1930s of understanding stress. It wasn't a history of stress. We've had stress forever. There was a medical doctor from Hungary, Hans Selye, and he talked about the stages of stress and how we are confronted with stress. We also now, since Hans Selye, we've learned so much more now. We've learned, even in the 1930s, in Russia, we learned about adaptogenic stress. We learned now the physiology with the NRF2 ARE pathways, how we adapt to stress. We've learned the stages of stress. We know what they correlate to what physiological. Now, what's happening to our bodies as we're confronted with our mortality and our own vulnerability and the unknown. Yesterday, I heard an interview with a woman, I believe her name is Gelbert, I'm not 100% sure, but she wrote She's one of the best science writers of the last 20, 25 years. And she wrote The Coming Plague and predicted everything we're going through. And she said that, and I've heard that from a number of sources overseas, that this plague is likely to last for at least 3 years. And thinking that we're going to suddenly one day wake up and, like the US government thinks it can, that we're going to go back to business and people are going to be okay, might be a little bit of magical thinking of thinking. Typically, epidemics and pandemics do last for about 3 years. And within that, we are stressed. As more demand goes up, we react with higher cortisol. Um, our brain is on set from the hippocampus to be on fight or flight more easily. And we attempt to be aware of how to protect ourselves. It's much more acute because the everyday environment that we used to relax with. I know myself, I used to go down to the ebb tide and look at the ocean and look at the whales and sit there for hours, and there went my stress. So the things that we're dependent on are no longer there for us at the same degree, but we're still here. So we can use what we learned to not only prosper, but also to handle stress. Now, the stages of stress that we talked about was the first stage is alarm, and literally the alarm goes off. And suddenly you wake up in the morning, and if you don't have your cup of coffee, you notice that it's more and more difficult to function. That means that you're putting out more energy than you're replacing it with, that you haven't found a way to balance that life. And there's only to a point you can do that. So today, with the COVID-19 virus, we're constantly on edge. No matter how well we can meditate and how all these tools, the alarm is going off almost automatically. That's the first stage. And then after that, we go through resistance. That's when we try to compensate. A lot of people will get into bad habits or even good habits, exercise or over-exercise, or healthy food but over-healthy food, taking things too intensely, and worrying is basically being in the alarm state and not exiting the alarm state. We're not designed to be in the alarm state. We're literally designed to be alarmed, do something about it, and move on. So you have the alarm, you have resistance. So when you're in resistance, your cortisol goes up and your fight or flight goes up. There was that great book written in the 90s, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. It's because the zebras get away from the lion and then the stress dissipates. They take a deep breath and they relax, and it's as if they never was stressed. Humans retain the stress. We don't get away from it. We have to learn techniques. And it's one of the best techniques that is in nature, and we talked about it, I think 2 weeks ago, maybe last week, that in a lot of the spiritual teachings, that the environment contains all these herbs, and when the herb's defense mechanism is released and we partake in them, it puts us in a position of resistance. So we go from the alarm to the resistance, that we have actually defense. We have something to do. And so the resistance phase is when we designed that most powerful herbal combination, viral defense, where we took 6 of the most powerful immune herbs, mixed them together at the right proportions, and that wasn't easy, and finding the herbs was was even harder. And that makes it very difficult for our immune system not being able to be productive when confronted with a threat.
So, Dr. Cohen, just to recap that, the main stages of stress is, or I captured, is alarm stage, then resistance stage, and move on stage, right? Where you move on and forget about it. But as humans, we do retain that stress. And at the beginning, you mentioned that stress can be negative, but also can be positive impact. So, how do we balance between when do we know that we need to retain stress to move forward and survive, and when do we need to relax?
Well, you need both. You need to relax every day.
Because there is such a culture these days that everybody needs to relax and meditate, but maybe we don't need that much relaxation meditation. We need to retain some level of stress to survive, yet have the mechanism to relax when needed. So how do we distinguish when is the time for us to relax?
By taking the time and learning your life's purpose and putting your energy in fulfilling your life's purpose. And the trick I learned, I think it was 1967, from a great spiritual teacher, was one of the ways to retain that focus and purpose is taking the time to figure out what you question. Everybody in their life has a question. And when you're incarnated, when you're born, the way you live your life becomes the answer to your question. And the question is not uniquely to you, it has to be universal. And I was told at that time that not to spend my time looking for answers, but looking for the right questions. And what are the right questions? How can I help others be healthy, focused, find the truth, trust, experience gratitude together, and then share the love? So within that framework becomes the question. Am I doing that or am I not doing that?
Hmm.
And the questions come, do I go to the ocean and watch the whales when they're there? Or do I take a seminar to learn something new? Or do I study a book? These are all the choices. And the tension within the choices mean how at peace are you? Now, what happens when you get off your purpose? That becomes the next stage of Celia's work. So when resistance starts to break down, you start getting symptoms. You wake up in the morning and you lacking dopamine. You say, why am I going to work? Why am I fighting with my spouse? Why am I trying to make money in the stock market? And I'm waking up more and more exhausted. And that's the next stage, exhaustion. So when you're exhausted, that means you're running a deficit. That means you went to the bank and somehow, because you're excellent at keeping accounts, you convinced the bank to lend you energy or lend you money without having the reserves to be able to pay it back. And so if you're functioning in your life and you're not getting replenished, you're not getting rewarded, that means you're lacking dopamine. You're lacking catecholamines. So you feel like you're not getting rewarded for your effort. And so that puts you into the exhaustion stage. And then, go ahead.
What kind of reward are we looking for here? You're saying you don't get rewarded for your effort, and therefore you feel the exhaustion.
The reward that you're getting is the feeling of being at peace with yourself.
Okay.
If you're at peace with yourself, you're you're living a meaningful life. And we're designed for that. So what happens at the hippocampus and the temporal lobe of your brain? It goes into your dopamine, and this we see all the time in this office. And that's one of the reasons why we give herbs to help with that. If the dopamine in your hippocampus, which is rich in cortisol, that's important to understand. Cortisol is the stress hormone. And cortisol exists in the adrenals. That's when people say adrenal exhaustion. So right next to the adrenal is progesterone. And we have an epidemic of females in this country or in this hemisphere that are suffering from the stage of exhaustion. They're trying to do everything they can to please somebody without taking the time to know what they need to do to please themselves. And then they come in with liver and estrogen dominant problems. They're lacking the ability to detox. And then you get hormonal problems. And then if you have too much estrogen or you start converting your estrogen because the estrogen is the wrong estrogen in your body and it converts to testosterone.
Can we just pause for a minute here? And I'm sure a lot of you listeners ask yourselves what liver has to do with hormones. And I see that over and over. Patients in our clinic, they come with liver problems and they get treated for hormones, and vice versa. They come with hormone problems and they get treated for liver. And they ask, like, what is he treating me? This is hormones, this is for hormonal things. So can you explain that?
Where do you think the hormones are made? And all hormones, there are many different, are not separate. So hormones are meant to detoxify. So I'll give you one that you see a lot in the office by talking to patients, is that they end up being estrogen dominant. It doesn't mean they have too much estrogen. They end up being not enough progesterone to balance the estrogen. And then they start retaining things. So what's the backup system when you start retaining toxins? Your backup system is the liver, is to go through the skin. And then you get autoimmune disease. So you get from the liver problem with the hormones, you get where it starts to get, you can't detox water-soluble toxins, and the body tries to get them out through the skin. And then if your estrogen is too high and it's pumping too high, the body will try to avoid autoimmune disease by converting your estrogen to testosterone. So you have less estrogen, but you don't want to have, as a female, you don't want to have excess testosterone. The whole point in life is to be yourself.
So this is very interesting that you're touching on autoimmune disease, because a couple of weeks ago we talked about autoimmune and Shikimate pathway. So can you tie this all in now, autoimmune, Shikimate pathway, liver, and hormones?
Okay, the Shikimate pathway is the excuse the federal government used to allow GMOs to be authorized back in '96, I think it was. They said human cells don't have a Shikimate pathway, and GMOs, Roundup, destroys molecules or microbes with Shikimate pathways. So Shikimate pathway is where, in ancient times, the first unicellular microbes would convert nutrients from the soil in life-sustaining force. And so human cells don't have a Shikimate pathway. So in 96, we didn't understand the biome as well as we know now, the molecules. So guess what has a shikimate pathway? Our bacteria. We can't handle stress and growth and survival without our own shikimate pathway in the microbes, converting the nutrients into life-sustaining force. And so, without us protecting our gut and GI tract, remembering that 99% of the DNA in our bodies are produced by microbes, not by us. And if we don't have a functioning shikimate pathway, we can't repair. Guess what happens when we can't repair? When you can't repair is when you can't handle your stress. Where does it show up? It shows up initially in the GI pattern. All the great old natural healers always said go to the gut. So if you have a gut problem, you know you have a systemic problem. And it's going to manifest in multiple ways. If you're retaining weight and you're gaining weight, we've had patients that hardly ate anything and exercised nonstop and they kept gaining weight. It's tied to all these multiple levels of lack of integration. If you're eating foods that are not foods, they're make-believe foods, I think one of the worst mistakes ever made, and it was pointed out by somebody I have a royal leave, that who came up with the idea that you can have better health by ingesting poison? We built a whole system of medical care based on poisoning ourselves. And if we can't clear the poison, you're going to have eventually a breakdown in multiple systems.
And that really touches on the toxicity that we talked last week, right? You know, how to detox the body and how to.
Yes, correct.
So it is very interesting that, you know, stress is really touching on all the topics that we covered so far, and it's really
Correct.
impacted. So talk about immune system, like surviving in coronavirus environment and having the stress that people are having.
Okay. So what I encourage people to do is take all the pieces that we built for them, which is a lifetime of work, so we can survive in a hostile environment. The coronavirus, the big problem with the coronavirus is ignorance. Our immune system is basically ignorant. It's never seen a virus like this. And a virus is basically genetic material that needs proteins from a host to reproduce itself. No virus wants to kill the host. It needs the proteins. We give the coronavirus the proteins. And then the virus can duplicate itself and spread itself. The problem is what's called a cytokine storm, that our initial immune reaction, when it doesn't recognize what is a foreign invader, what's a poison, what's a threat, and goes, oh my God, there's a threat here, but I have no idea what it is, it overreacts. And the overreact is causing the pandemic. So what do we have to do? We have to learn what kind of lifestyle, and it's not one thing, it's not one remedy or one nutritional supplement, it's not one meditation. We have to learn how to educate this virus and our immune system to recognize it. Because we talked about in the Journal of Cellular Biology, they showed that it's like a Peter Sellers movie. Instead of arresting the bank robbers, he's giving parking tickets. It sounds funny, but that's literally what happens. Our immune cells, our macrophages and our mast cells, what they do is they pass by and ignore the pathogen. So let's say it ignores corona, and we have enough corona. And so we have one day we have a breakdown and we have vulnerabilities. So in the corona, the COVID-19, which by the way, I forgot to mention, is mutating. They know at least 19, probably 21 mutations. So if they're thinking there's going to be one vaccine for all the mutations, that's being very optimistic. So our immune system doesn't know that COVID-19 is a threat. We've never seen anything like that. And if you think about it, they've never come up with a vaccine, and I have a lot of friends that worked on it for years for the HIV. They've never come up with an effective one for the flu because it keeps mutating. It outsmarts us. So we have to depend on our own knowledge and our own determination. We know how to educate the immune system.
And that is, you mean, through the protocol that you designed, the immune protocol of 3 stages? With...
Yeah, the first stage is allowing our immune cells to recognize something as a pathogen. We have to take our immune system to school and repeating over and over again. That's every single day, 3 times a day, giving it the information. Remember, nutrition is information. The nutrients are the way we carry information around our bodies. And so it knows. So that's why we start off with calcium bicarbonate. That's not calcium carbonate. That's not the supplements that you buy in the store or you buy from other dealers. It has to be bicarbonate. And bicarbonate, we use calcium lactate, which comes from beets, which converts to bicarbonate by only needing one enzyme. Or we can drink. So I had a patient today that was bragging about their well water and making me jealous because most well water has bicarbonate right in it. You drink it right out of the well. Nobody's been able to synthesize bicarbonate. So we've gotten close. So that's lactate. And for most people, 99.999, taking calcium lactate will give you calcium bicarbonate. That goes into the GI tract. Remember, the GI tract is where 80% of our immune system is, the IgA. You take a vaccine, it bypasses the GI tract, and then you're dealing with antibodies, which everybody's hearing about now, and which antibody tests will these antibody tests show us that we've already had contact and we survived, and therefore we have resistance. That's people that really haven't studied the immune system, how it works, would make a statement like that because it's constantly changing. And what history do we have? We emerged from nature. Everyone here has nature in each cell of the body. The whole history, how nature started converting form into consciousness. And we need things from nature.
There's a very interesting question that touches upon what you're talking about. Marion is asking, Marion, thank you again for questions. How can we deal with stress, trauma passed on through stressed ancestors?
Boy,
it feels like old stress.
It is old stress. Um, I don't think tonight I have time, but maybe next week we can do epigenetics. I think, did I explain epigenetics a couple
We touched upon a little bit.
about the mice with Gouty?
Yeah, we touched upon a little bit, but maybe you could go in greater detail.
That's what Marion is talking about, is generational stress. And the generational stress is carried through histones and attachments to genes, and it's governed by relationships with past relatives. And those are passed down. And that first was beginning to be explored in 1997. And the way to handle that, the way I've been handling it, is identify what's lacking. A big one that I've identified is a lot of our stress comes from the birth process. And one of the things I use in practice is there was a group of amazing women, really amazing. I mean, one of the breakthroughs who got together in the UK and decided that they were going to change homeopathy and they were going to make homeopathy from a female standpoint. Because if you study the history of homeopathy, it's over 95% male, probably even higher. So you're talking about hysterical women in the old days and stuff like that that has no truth. And they got together as a team and came up with what's called the matridonal remedies. And there's a bunch of them that I've worked effectively in reprogramming the birth process. Because in the birth process, you start carrying past generations and past family from generations ago. That starts to get programmed into your survival mechanism. Then you have people that have trauma from the great grandparents. In females, it comes from the great great grandmother, what she went through when she was going through birth. This is science, by the way. This is not metaphysics or esoteric. This is straight current science. Um, and then in males, it's from puberty on the male side. So a male is influenced by his great great grandfather and what he experienced when he was transferring over into puberty. And from a female, it was from her great great grandmother when she was born by the previous generation. And all the trauma is downloaded into the new child. And what does the new child do to come out healthy so it can handle that stress? Mother's milk. What could be a better introduction to this physical world than your own mother's milk and the love of her self-sacrificing and give you that? That enables your immune system to function and resist pathology and resist stress. So every child needs to be introduced to this world by mother's milk. So that was made into a remedy. We had somebody who's probably listening tonight, but we talked about her remedy. We won't say who it is, of course, but she had a father that was abusive and absent. And so the remedy that comes from these really amazing ladies, I can't thank them enough for how many people I've been able to help using their ability to go past the paradigm and break the break the limitations we had from a male point of view. And so I prescribed placenta. Now, if you look at placenta, that feeds the baby in gestation, but the question always came up, why does the placenta come from the father's genetics and not the mother's? I mean, everything else comes from the mom. And then when I thought about it a number of years ago, and it comes from the father, because otherwise everything would go to mom and only the leftovers would go to the baby. Just everybody, every being wants to feed itself first. And only through self-sacrifice will a mother self-sacrifice herself so the baby can grow. But just to make sure, nature did that from the father.
So what you mean when the female is born, the placenta comes from the paternal genes?
Correct.
Oh, very interesting. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. So what happens if you're a female, let's say, you're born a female, your mother loves you to death, and she self-sacrifices, and she does everything possible that you have a great life, and she feeds you and holds you and nurtures them. What happens if you don't have a father? What if the father's off in a completely different world? Yet you have the genetics that formed you, that you need your father to feed you. Now that's stress, that's conflict. That's why we need both parents. And that's why we have to teach these new generations how important it is to learn how to forgive themselves for the mistakes of previous generations. Because if we look at the earth and how it's been exploited and destroyed, you're going to have a younger generation that's going to be pretty angry. I would be. I'm angry.
Mary was just saying that that you gave her some particular remedy that was deeply transformative, and that probably comes from the same woman that you talked about.
Women, there was about 12 of them.
Yeah, it was about 12 women. Um,
Marion, that's correct. It came from the same matrodonal remedies.
I just want to go back to, you mentioned something that we do see a lot of people, patients who come here and that dealing with large amounts of stress, whether it's epigenetic stress, whether it's a real life stress, whether it's coronavirus stress. What do you do? What is your, how to say, tool, or how do you deal, how do you help people with stress?
Well, like I said, it's all kinds of stress. Um, the way I do it personally, or there's many ways to do it. I pretty much have taught myself to listen and throw out my prejudices. And it's a train going by. So if you deeply listen and avoid coming to conclusions, I realize my main goal is to get people to come to their own conclusions. And so I guide them and point things out. And the whole history is to learn, how did people adapt? And I have multiple tools. One of them is which I wanted to go into. By the way, the last stage of stress is irreversible exhaustion. And that when somebody's on, with a cancer or poisoned or an autoimmune disease, and we don't know how long they're going to last. And that's irreversible stress. So the key is to go into exhaustion and work hard to get them out of exhaustion and get them into resistance. So dealing with stress is knowing, what do I need? What kind of herbs do I need? What kind of nutrition do I need? What kind of relationships do I need? Me, it's the ocean and learning. I can be completely stressed out. Give me something I don't know and learn, and I'm in heaven. Especially if it comes from somebody that knows a lot more than I do. Everybody has to find what they work. Some people it's cooking. A lot of people it's meditation, yoga. It's having a routine. So back in the 30s, those of you from Eastern Europe, and we have a number of them on watching, originally their families were from Eastern Europe. Joseph Stalin was ruling the Soviet Union. He was originally from Georgia, not our Georgia, not the U.S. Georgia, but the Caucasus Georgia. And he came to the conclusion, for Russia to win the World War II and also to expand its empire, he needed everybody to work harder. And he identified three things. He said, he asked the scientists, or probably didn't ask them, ordered the scientists to come up with a way that his soldiers can fight longer and harder and be as effective as they are now. Then there was a lot of starvations in the Soviet Union. So he ordered his farmers to be able to double their yield. Then the third thing he needed, people willing to sacrifice for the country and not put their energy in accumulating material wealth, but put it in terms of wealth for the Soviet Union. And that's what he did. And what the scientists did, because the last thing they wanted to do was roaming the streets, because Bering's Secret Service, if he sees somebody wandering the streets, were picking them up and sending them to the Gulag, to Siberia. And so it was an incentive for the scientists to stay in their laboratories, and they came up with the concept of adaptogenic herbs. And if you think about it, it's not unique to the Soviet Union, but this group was unique to them, and they're still using them today. Is that that in each herb, an herb will not survive out in nature. And one of the ways I came up with some of my formulas that have been most effective over the last 30 years is going out in nature and looking at which herbs do well with each other. Because they communicate, they're alive, and they figure out ways to produce defense mechanisms. So what protects them from predators gets transferred back to us if we eat the herbs and take them correctly, and gives our immune system a boost. And they're known as the adaptogenic herbs. I'll just give you a few. For stress, it's schizandra, rhodiola, uh, uh, some from other cultures, but from the Russian ones, big one is eleuthero, which they misnamed. They called it Siberian ginseng, it wasn't ginseng and it wasn't Siberian, but it's very effective. And now in Russia itself, they use eleuthero along with chemotherapy. So the adaptogenic herbs, and we're going now back to 15, 20 years ago, we found that a certain pathway, which is critical for us to survive this epidemic and all the other stresses and the damage to the earth and the damage to our body, it's called the NRF2 ARE pathways, which it's complex. We don't have time to go through that tonight. but it basically allows us to survive high amounts of stress. They're the same herbs that the Russians found in the 1930s work on that pathway. And when stress is breaking down our health and we're going into an exhaustion stage, the same herbs the Russians found in the 1930s correct the problem. And so we come up with unique formulas based on what we find in the interview, and we mix adaptogenic herbs, and people can handle their stress. It literally changes lives. So we start off with the immune system, which we all need now. We need it for us to be around in the next 3 years, let's say. We need an educated immune system. And when the medicine Buddha, said uh, that all solutions to all demands that are hurting our health, the solution can be found in nature. That's understanding how nature created these defense mechanisms. And now we're beginning to understand the science. And then we discovered a number of years ago, which is a major one, was that it's called the microglia, the glia cells, and some of you have benefited from my glia formula, that the glia are produced in our hippocampus while communicating. Remember, the hippocampus is extremely rich in stress receptors. So the glia are in the NRF2 pathways. We find that when somebody's in long-term stress, their hippocampus stops making glia. So when I went to school and I learned, I was told that you can't drink alcohol because it destroys brain cells and you can't replace them. We now know that the glia are made in the hippocampus, as long as you have a functioning hippocampus. And hippocampus is where memory and ability to adapt to stress comes from. So, and that gets communicated through the cortisol or mechanism with sugar. So what's going to happen? Why do people get depressed? There was a great paper coming out of Hebrew University in Jerusalem on depression and glia cells. That was only about 4 years ago. That when we can't adapt to stress, because the glia cells protect our nervous system, protect our brains, and protect our immune system. If we stop making them or we don't make them enough, we become exhausted. And so then you see the type of depressions where people can't get out of bed. Somebody says to me, I just want to sleep. I know they have a damaged glia cells. So that's one of the things I'll prescribe is the glia formula, but we need to understand that the body's not stupid. It's going to send what it has to the essential organs until we can make glia cells. Glia cells are probably more important than nerve cells.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen. That was really great. You touched on so many subjects today, and kind of you brought them all home to what we talked about in all these weeks. And I'm sure some of you sitting there and having even more questions, which we would be so happy to answer. If you have any questions, you can always email it to us. You know how to reach us. Dr. Cohen and his team is here to support you guys in whatever shape or form you need. And get ready for your meditation. And I don't see any other questions. And Marion, that's a good idea. We might touch on the ancient stress or ancestor stress and maybe prepare a little talk next week. And if anybody has any other topics, we are happy to answer. I know, they say the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. So I feel the same way. I'm sitting here learning with you and I understand how little I know about everything, and it makes me want to learn more. But please don't get discouraged. It will all make sense at some point in your life, whether you come here for the appointment or you are thinking through your own life story.
And don't forget to protect yourselves right away. Because the more especially this past week, the more I'm understanding how vulnerable we are, and I'm all questioning the people in charge whether they have any clue of what's really going on. So educate people, tell them it's not hopeless. We can do things. We have knowledge, and we can awaken our immune system so we, no matter what the environment's going on, we can walk through it and still be compassionate and peaceful and healthy. Just we need to learn and trust science and facts, and anything that just talks about weird conspiracies that have no scientific basis, and that's more and more coming out. People are actually forwarding me stuff that's on the internet and asking my opinion. And there's a lot of people that have ulterior motives that are not based on the truth. You have to be very careful who you trust.
As long as we have Dr. Cohen, we'll be okay. We will be fine. And just some guidance and science. And, I know I want to also share that Dr. Cohen is participating in these breakthrough webinars that a lot of top scientists, top microbiologists are putting together, about COVID crisis and about our immune system. So, I'm very impressed that up to this day, I feel like you're learning new things every day. You never stop learning and saying, I know everything. I have 40 years of experience doing this thing, and I have a lot of appreciation and respect. And hopefully, it translates to better doctor for you guys and better medicines.
Yeah. And they'll keep getting better. So I think we hit it right on uh, the COVID-19, the viral defense, and um, and it's still working. Okay, so take a few moments, allow the breath to go in your mouth. Let the breath go all the way down to your immune system, your belly. And keep in mind as you go into your meditation and your awakening, keep in mind this is a process. Even the COVID-19 is a process. All life is about transformation, changing form to produce elegant and expanding consciousness. And to live in this world with the body, in order to have these type of experiences that raise consciousness, we have to go through things very rapidly. That all consciousness is produced by experience, and all experience is produced by the changing of form at a super high speed. Take a few moments and just allow yourself to merge with the truth and realize how awesome you are. But being awesome means you have a responsibility. You have to be discerning and generous with your knowledge and your emotions. And so life can expand back into the non-physical, where it came from contraction and expansion at the same time. That the smaller we became, the more opportunistic we became in creating an evolving consciousness. Take a few moments, feel how awesome you are, how powerful you are. How nothing put in front of you has stopped you from reaching this point. Take a few moments, and I'll join you shortly, and just go deep within yourself. Now take a few moments and realize when you educate your immune system and you create an environment where it doesn't become autoimmune, it doesn't get confused what's you and what's not you. That information is not only benefits you and protects you, it protects everybody around you. If we've learned anything from this pandemic, is that all life is connected. And that nature has within itself the ability not only to protect ourselves, but to educate ourselves and remind us who we are. Take a few moments and think how you can apply that to your life, the people you love, and the people you serve. And don't think of it as just family or friends or spouse. Think of it as community. That there's nothing in the community that's not dependent on something else within the community. Take a few moments explore this and realize how potent and powerful this and how this thought is needed to be shared everywhere. Take a few moments. Just allow it to permeate your whole sense of being. Remember, it's timeless and has existed in nature. And in life, way before there was even life on this planet. Feel it in your toes, feel it in your knees, feel it in your shoulders, in your belly, feel it in your skull, and feel it in your future. You carry this. This is your destiny. You're here at this time because you have a purpose. Everything you do interacts with other attributes you have. You're part of a long lineage that long before we had conscious memories planted the seed of life in this solar system. The seed means it has the potential to blossom into something unique and awesome. Take a few moments and feel how fortunate you are. Everyone here. And everyone here is dependent on everyone else. I'll join you shortly. Just take a few moments. And remember, we all are the children of truth. And we had the good fortune, no matter how much we were hurt by those we loved, no matter how much we were challenged, that we all came from self-sacrifice. We all came from someone playing the role of giving something precious to them up so we can have this life. And we can take a few moments and give them gratitude. All life, not just human life. And when we go through the gratitude and all the good that we've done, all the giving, that gave us the potential to have love. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are all children of the light. Open your eyes, take a deep breath, stretch, and welcome back to the physical world that's now being challenged. May you have my blessings and love. Have a deep sleep. Good night.